All right, welcome everybody to another episode of the Big Doug and Carmi Show, your one-stop shop for all things Commanders. It is a Friday, so you're going inside the command center let's do that. Today's guest is Ben Standig from The Athletic. Ben, how are you?
Doug, I'm doing great. I appreciate you having me on.
Live from location is Ben after today's practice. Uh, Ben, anything of major note from practice today?
Yeah, like I said, I'm in my car, hence the steering wheel. No, it was kind of quiet. I mean, Dorrance Armstrong's not going to play Sunday, and it seemed like that's where it was heading. I know earlier in the week he was definitely in some discomfort in like the standard way we would all be in discomfort if you hurt your rib. Um, Other than that, not really. There's only Yeah, not really. That was pretty much it. I mean, I think Brian Robinson's trending in the right direction. I mean, Dan Quinn said as much as he practiced, so I'm expecting him to play, whether that's the usual workload or not. We'll see, but I would imagine he'll play. So other than that, fairly quiet day. But yeah.
When I talked to Grant Paulson last Friday, he had mentioned being in the locker room at halftime, and Brian Robinson looked upset. And I won't ask you to speculate about what Grant said, but I'm curious if you thought he hurt bad enough that you think that they would have kept him out, or he was excuse me, or he was upset that he couldn't get back in the game. Like, do you think he got
Well,
injured and
look,
was upset, or he was upset that he wasn't going back in?
yeah. He I so this was after the Browns game when he only played in the first half and didn't come out.
Right.
Didn't play in the second half, and I didn't see it, but I had heard that he was seemed to be everybody else was in a good mood after a win, and he seemed to be a bit unhappy, distraught. But ultimately, I think it's probably the injury related, as best I can tell. Look, all these guys want to play and are competitors, but he seems to have an extra gear in that regard. Like it seems like it's his oxygen almost to be out there. So I'm assuming that it was just that he was hurting enough that they decided to keep him out. Obviously, by the fact that the next week he didn't play against the Ravens, so beyond that, I don't think there was any issue going on in terms of his uh his attitude or anything.
I know it's a weird concept, but we often hear like, well, if it was such and such game, right? Or if it was a playoff game, like, do you think Robinson played last week? Let's say if that was to get into into the playoff spot or to win the division, or
I
was
mean,
he
I remember,
was he hurt?
yeah, I mean, I remember Dan Quinn saying, he would go out there now if we let him. So I assume there was something to that. But again, to go back to the Browns game, yeah, he had 2 touchdowns, but they only had like 7 rushes for like 16 yards. So he clearly wasn't completely effective. So, look, I also think they are trying to look at the full season and say, hey, we need this guy. You know, Maybe this is a week we got to give him a rest here at some point and nurse him through at times when he needs it to get through the season. So I don't think it was a big deal. Oh, I mean, obviously he missed a game, but I don't think it's like something crazy. And they wouldn't throw him out there. I don't think if it was like, hey, this guy really needs to be out there for a month, and they were like being cavalier about it. I don't feel like they're doing that.
It's I know it's the NFL. You're not supposed to overlook the next opponent, but do you think they're thinking at all about, man, it'd be nice to give the guy another rest week?
I mean, if the staff thinks that's needed, the medical staff, but he seemed to think he was going to play this week, and I haven't seen the official injury report for today, but he practiced the last 2 days to some degree. So yeah, anything's possible, but I would imagine he'll be out there, assuming again that he's good and the doctors think he's fine.
How much does the offense miss him when he's not out there?
Well, I think a lot. I mean, like I had people say to me last week, "Hey, I don't know how much different it would have been even if he had played because the Ravens' run defense is that good." I would largely disagree with that. Not even in terms of like the run game itself, but like this offense. Look, they're scoring a lot of points. We all get it, but beyond Jaden Daniels, the only real playmakers that they kind of have are Terry McLaurin, and I would argue Brian Robinson. Yeah, Austin Eckler can come in and give you some stuff, but he's not giving a massive workload. Robinson is the guy that they rely on it, whether it's short yardage in the red zone or whether it's, just play to play, um, running the ball, toughness, and he's also a viable pass catcher. So he can give, he's going to make the defense cover him in various ways. So I think it's a big deal when he's out. And also, like, again, the Ravens run D is pretty good. So maybe they would have been more reliant on the pass than the run anyway. But sometimes I think a coach, coordinator, even when they all say we got to be balanced, when your main guy isn't there and the other options, be it Eckler and Jeremy McNichols, are not. I mean, they're not going to be able to replace him just based on their own abilities. That you can get away from the run a bit, and I don't think they were. I mean, it's pretty clear they weren't in the same mode that they had been in most of the season. Granted, they were trailing a fair amount, but I feel like they kind of, if Robinson's there, I think they would stay a little bit more balanced as long as they could.
I saw Sando was on your podcast, Last Man Standing, the rebrand I love. He said, I thought it was curious what he said, and we've heard this a bunch from national guys so far, is that you ask about whether JD5 can kind of continue the success he's had. He's largely driving the train on this thing. What what did you not have right about Daniels coming out of college that now that you've gotten a closer look at him, you can kind of say, well, I didn't realize we were getting that.
How do I say this and not sound like arrogant? I mean, I'm not like somebody who relies on my film watching to be my guide because I don't pretend I have all the answers there. So, you try to talk to as many people as you can, and from the Senior Bowl and talking to his teammates, from the whole off-season or pre-draft stuff and talking to scouts and others about him, I thought I had a pretty good view that he was a guy who was a leader, but more in a lead by example slash he's a good dude that people like to hang around. He's not a guy that's going to be rah rah, and we've seen that play out. I think it's been one of his strengths is that he doesn't get high or low, regardless of whether they lose a game or whether he keeps winning various rookie of the week awards. So I think all that was pretty spot on. The dual threat, obviously, we all knew that off the bat. There was a because he had so many big stats at LSU, and a lot of them are the highlight type kind. There's maybe always a sense of like, well, he can make some big plays, but isn't consistent. I mean, I haven't seen that at all. He's been willing to take the underneath stuff. He's not forcing anything. I think this ties into the idea that he is because he's pretty chill and level headed and not he doesn't go up and down. He's not trying to force anything. He's not trying to look the part. He's just playing the part, even when that means putting the ball in the hands of your playmakers and letting them do their job. So, yeah, I mean, I don't really think I don't think there's been much the way I was looking at the draft that is different. I was again, I'm not trying to you know pat myself on the back or anything, but like fairly early on, like as I do mock drafts all the time, and uh, maybe the first one I had gone with Drake, maybe because just in trying to catch up, it seemed like that was um, more of the consensus. But when I did like my first I think like real one, I had Jaden at 2 and then never moved him. And this is like you know fairly early in the draft cycle because it just felt like he made a lot of sense. And I would just say that like being around him now as much as I have been, to see him in that space in that locker room. I mean, he is relatively speaking one of the guys, and that's not always the case with quarterbacks. I mean, it was with Sam Howell, and like I'm not saying these guys have previously been like divas or anything, but at the same time, we all get it. There's like a different level, and when you had as much hype as he did, winning the Heisman, he easily could have been come in and been like chesty and look at me, but it's not been that way at all. So um, the way I looked at it, I think has been pretty spot on so far with him, but we'll see.
His relationship with Cliff Kingsbury is interesting. It sounds like they collaborate a lot on the offense. and it's been remarkable to see him. I know you did the article on the usage of the VR, but they ask him to do a lot at the line because of how much they're in the gun and how quickly they're moving. One, do they change the hand signals week to week? Do you know? And how complicated is the system as far as getting it in and then getting everyone where they need to go basically with those hand signals?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, they he can Cliff Kingsbury can talk to him,
Mhm.
before for the once the play clock starts for a little bit before it gets turned off. Um, you know, I think if other rookies were in this system, I don't know how much they would be able to do all the things that they're doing. But for me, I like to me where I really saw where this was going was that first preseason game. He's at the line. He's facing his. It's on his first professional drive, his first third down. The offensive line was missing like almost all the starters. The coaches are calling for a very simple play just to get out of it, and he audibles to that pass to De'Ami Brown and completes the perfect throw for 42 yards. That said to me right there that he had a lot of confidence in himself. But again, it's not like showy confidence, but he had confidence. And then after that, like they went down to Miami, and I talked to Kingsbury a little bit on the side, and I said to him, to me, that said a lot. Do you agree? And then does that let you give you more confidence in his ability to see what's happening? He's like, yes, that the confidence part is huge for rookies, but that also he's I think maybe it was already there, but from that point on has given him a lot more autonomy. And he said that Kingsbury said to me, at the end of the day, you're the one on the field. I'm calling it in. I think I know what we should do, but you're seeing it. And Daniels quickly had them thinking he knows what he's talking about. He knows what he sees. And therefore, they give him a lot more flexibility with what's happening out there than I could imagine, not just rookies. I bet there's veteran quarterbacks or guys who've at least been in the league for a little bit who probably wouldn't have that level of autonomy. So again, it's a collaborative thing, like you said. Like even yesterday, or yeah, no, yeah, yesterday, Terry McLaurin was talking about. I think it was the second touchdown pass that Daniels threw to him that that Daniels in the huddle was like, "Oh, what should we do? What do you want to do here? What do you want to call?" And they did it, and obviously it worked. And Terry told us like, that's not what happens here. That's not how this works. Not to mention it's in game. The clock's moving. You only have so much time to figure this out. So for him to have the poise, the calm, and the willingness to say, okay, what do you think? And then they execute it and then they score, like, just says so much about where this kid is at mentally beyond the physical trait that we all are pretty impressed by.
And the hand signals, do they change week to week?
I think typically they do just so you don't, uh, uh, whatever scouting is done, you're not trying to, you're trying to hide things. I always think it's so funny. People always give Belichick a hard time for Spygate and whatever. Uh, how many times do we see a coach on the sideline, no matter who they're playing, put up the sandwich board over their mouth to not see? Well, why are you doing that unless other people are trying to steal it too? So it's everybody's being very covert. What did I just show here? Oh, this is my McDonald's order.
Nice.
Anyway, so yeah, so yeah, I think you're always trying to cover things up because teams are looking for any edge that they can get.
If JD5 has been the most impressive so far, to me, the second most has been the center Beatis. They spend a lot of time in that gun. And I can't tell you that I remember seeing one snap down in the dirt or one that he's going flying for. It's fairly impressive. And even when they get under shotgun, they've been pretty clean. What is the coaching staff saying about Beatis? Because I think he's been impressive so far.
Yeah, I would agree. It's funny. Um, the kicking situation was a talk of the whole summer. It was a bit of a mess all the way through week one. And then they sign Austin Seibert, and barring the one kick that was blocked, it's been perfect. I say that because we remember the last few years. They were going through 3 and 4 and 5 centers, injuries, poor play, whatever. And now this guy's come in, and obviously Biotish has been an established guy in the league, but it's been, I'll knock on wood for the injury part, but it's been pretty steady. His, I haven't looked this week, but the ESPN, their stats that show line play and run block, pass block. Biotish has been among the leaders for interior linemen this whole time. And like you said, both with him and Tyler Ott, the long snapper, we haven't seen balls rolling back there or any concerns. So yeah, I think he's done a really good job. And um, when we go back to where we were in the offseason, a lot of questions about the line. It was about the tackles. It wasn't really about the interior stuff because Biotish has been established. Sam Cosmi obviously had a big year last year. Algretti wasn't a starter for the Chiefs per se, but he's started for them in the Super Bowl, and he was with that team. It was the tackles. The interior play figured to be the strength of the line, and I think it's played out that way.
The improvement of the line, the two guys you mentioned obviously are a big factor. How much of it do you attribute the better play to the scheme that they're using, the offensive line coach, or is it just Jaden Daniels able to make guys look right?
I guess I would answer that yes, the credit for everything. But like I do believe, before the season started for the Athletic, they asked us to write sort of the bosses asked us to write sort of like a notebooky kind of thing. Like what are we seeing? What's the thing that we're really paying attention to, noticing going into the year? And I wrote that for all the talk about Jaden Daniels, that Cliff Kingsbury is going to have to be at his tactical best because there's still a lot of questions. They still don't have a lot of playmakers at receiver, and in the offensive line, and he's a rookie and all that. And I think the way they're playing, a lot of screens, a lot of short passes, the up tempo. I think that is all benefiting the line, and also the balanced attack part. Sam Cosmi was very unhappy last year, and expressed that to us at the end of the year about the games where, as we remember, the throwing the ball 50 times a game. And there was that one Bears game when it was, I forget the number, but the insane amount of consecutive passes. And the offensive linemen, they don't want to do that every time. They want to get in there. They want to run, and I think that has also helped. For sure. And I would say, like, I agree the things you said, including credit to the offensive line coach, Bobby Johnson, all warranted. But I also just think that, look, we've all had jobs where we sort of we're like, oh, I gotta go to work today. It's hard to not believe that some of these guys weren't feeling that way. Certainly amid the 8-game losing streak, but just in general, right? I think they're all pretty happy to come to work these days. They're all in seemingly much better moods. We see the mic'd up segments on the team website, and they're serious, but they're having a lot of fun, and that fun is translating, I think, into taking extra steps on their own behalf of what it is that they're doing. And I think it all ties in for sure. I mean, I still wonder if when they go up against some better teams, perhaps, like what does that mean for the pass rush ultimately? But between Jaden Daniels' ability to get out of traffic and the way Kingsbury's calling it, I think it's in a pretty good shape right now.
Brandon Coleman has been great. There's no doubt about that, or at least pretty good, if not great. But poor Cornelius Lucas is the lost man, right? I mean, this thing they're doing out there, I would have never told you that I thought it would be a good idea, much less something that actually works. It's worked fairly well for him, and Lucas has been really good, if not just as good, if not better than Coleman. Are they going to do this all year? Ben, can you hear me?
You broke up there for a little bit. Can you hear me okay?
I can now. I said Cornelius Lucas feels like the lost man out here. They've been splitting time over there. Coleman's been good. Lucas has
Yeah.
been just as good. Are they going to keep doing this all year long?
Yeah, no. So I asked Kingsbury about this the other day, right? I mean, it's unusual. And like when they did some version of this a couple years ago with Sam Cosme right before he went and played inside, and he and Lucas were doing it at right tackle, that seemed sort of an acknowledgement of like they're just throwing things at the wall to see what sticks. This, I asked Kingsbury the other day, I'm like, okay, this is unusual. So what do we think here? And he goes, hey, it's working right now. We're going to keep going with it. My guess is that like Coleman's been fine, but maybe they just haven't felt like he's ready to be the full time guy quite yet. Otherwise, I would imagine it would have happened. Also, um, with Lucas, my view was, look, he'll be fine for a certain amount of weeks, right? Whenever he replaced Charles Leno or somebody, it wasn't like it was like, oh no, here comes a turnstile. But over time, I think is when the issue becomes and the other teams start to study more. It almost feels like you know how like in baseball sometimes like they'll say a pitcher has like 100 and I'll make a number 125 inning limit over the course of the year. So if he's a starter, well, that can get burned pretty quick. But if you keep him as a reliever, then you can stretch it out. It kind of feels like that's what they're doing. Rather than Lucas getting all his secrets exposed by week 6, now they're doing it, and maybe it's going to drag that out a bit longer. I think ultimately, if they feel that Coleman is ready to go, then I think they'll eventually go that way. But for now, yeah, they're doing it this way. Also, um, it's a weird deal. Typically, as we know in an offensive line, you either start or you don't play. This is allowing Lucas to be fresh and to be somebody that is involved, is engaged in ways beyond just simply being a professional. So maybe there's something to that as well. But yeah, like I said, I think ultimately it's Coleman's gig, but they got to feel comfortable enough to say, okay, he's good. We've seen enough. Let's throw him out there rather than doing what they're doing.
The defensive line has taken a major hit, as we all know. What is the plan to create some kind of pass rush against? Listen, the Panthers might not be good at a lot of things. The offensive line's been pretty good for them this year, top of the most of the metrics that you see. It's going to be tough generating that pass rush. What's their plan?
You think it's possibly a problem if they don't have John Allen and Dorrance Armstrong this week? That doesn't sound good to you.
I think it's not great.
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously inside, Johnny Newton's going to be much more front and center. I presume he'll start, and you know, big picture wise, I really figured John Allen's days were possibly numbered after the year, one way or the other, because of his contract scenario. And now Johnny Newton's gonna have a shot over the course of these next, whatever it's 11 games, to show that he's capable of being a guy. And it's hard to think that it's going to be an upgrade over what John Allen is. On the other hand, maybe an upgrade's not the right way to look at it, but maybe some newfound energy, and maybe he'll help the pass rush to some degree. We'll see. On the edge, Armstrong is definitely their best defensive end. They also lost, Javante Jean-Baptiste got placed on IR. He was coming off the bench playing a little bit. Cleveland Farrell and Dante Fowler have been, they both have, some sacks this year. I don't think anybody looks at them as like actual starters. They're more like role players who will come in. So they're going to be asked to be in more extended roles. When today we asked Dan Quinn, like, okay, well, what's the deal? How you gonna who do you expect to use more or need to step up? He mentions Newton. He mentions Fedarian Mathis. He mentions some of the ends I said. He also mentioned Jalen Holmes, one of the guys they picked up this week. Along with, he also mentioned Sheldon Day, who was activated from the practice squad to the main roster. One name he didn't mention was Jamin Davis, and I been sort of puzzled by this the whole time. Like, he's been, he switched positions multiple times. I don't imagine he's going to get on the field a lot at edge. If he doesn't play much this week and they use the guy who they just signed off the street, hopefully people can just sort of stop the asking. I mean, I think we've all sort of stopped asking to a degree, but yeah, I mean, basically it's going to be a group by committee, or I guess that is the committee, but pass rush by committee. Like, they don't have anybody who's all that. And I didn't mention Deron Payne in here. I mean, look, Deron Payne has been fine, but they don't pay him to be fine. They pay him to be a difference maker, and they just haven't gotten that out of him. Got it done out of him. And that was with Jonathan Allen there, so he's going to see even more attention. And he's never been the biggest pass rush help other than the 1 year where he got 11 and a half. He's going to have to be, whether it's in the pass rush or the run defense or whatever, he's going to just have to be a bigger, a more of a stout presence. Otherwise, this could get pretty ugly.
They don't really have the corners to play the way I think Quinn wants to play. I think he probably prefer to be in that single high look, and they just don't have it. What is the plan? Are we just at the point now where we've got to expect the offense to just it will it be a race to 35 every week?
I kind of think the answer is yes. I mean, like Joe Witt, like a lot of coaches do, is putting the onus on him. I got to do a better job of this and that. But he's also been, a bit candid at times. He said this week that he didn't specify the plays, but he said there were 4 plays that really were kind of the difference in his view for the Ravens game. And he talked about, communication in the secondary that, it's been a topic all summer and everything. And that's, one of the standard coaching deals, but it's continued. And he's like, look, there was like, when you communicate, it's about, I'm going to botch the term, whatever he said, but it's basically, there's 3 parts. There's the sending, there's the receiving, and then there's the executing what you think you heard. And he said there were a couple of those 4 plays. A couple were about the proper information was sent, but the person that received it misunderstood or just botched it. He said I think there was at least one of the message going out was sent incorrectly. And these things, can happen, of course, but I just think also there becomes a point, the term next man up. I get it, and you have to have that mentality, but often in a real sense, it's nonsense because the next man up is like, if Jaden Daniels was out, the next man up is Mariota. Nobody's expecting Mariota to be able to do what Jaden Daniels has been doing. So it's a mentality. It's not a reality. And the reality is they just at corner are just thin. And I just don't think they have enough to do much. So maybe the coaches can, strategize, and if the players execute it perfectly, they can get by. But I just don't think they have enough talent there to really make this work. So that's why, yes, the race to 35. Maybe not this week because Carolina just doesn't have a particularly robust offense. But in general, yeah, I think it's gonna, based on what we've seen, it's gonna have to be the offense that carries the day.
Couple more before we get you out of here. If they continue winning, let's say 2 out of the next 3, which seems reasonable. Do you think they will be buyers at the trade deadline? I thought a couple of weeks ago maybe there was a chance they'd be buyers and sellers, like maybe a certain D tackle that is not healthy anymore. Maybe you sell and buy a piece on the offense. Do you think that do you think they're concerned about adding on offense and disrupting a chemistry that seems pretty good right now? Do you think winning at all changes their perception, or do you think Peters is steadfast to the plan they had set before the season started?
Well, let me ask you this: what does a buyer constitute to you? Because obviously there's Devontae Adams, and then there's like the random guy you've never heard of that they get. Like, what constitutes as a buy?
Like Deontay Johnson from the Panthers, or like a T. Higgins from the Bengals. So some I guess a buyer to me would be something that elevates a position group more than it is now. Like is wide receiver 2 Noah Brown now? Which, by the way, they missed him when he wasn't in that game, right? I mean, you could tell they
Yeah.
were glad to have him back. So, yeah, I mean, getting
So
yes, that
yeah,
I guess that's it. Cortland Sutton from Denver, if he's not going to be snaps
yeah.
anymore.
Right. So I guess yeah. So if that's the level, which I agree that's what people would care about. I don't see that happening. Now I leave the possibility that if the Montez Sweat equivalent, a 24, 25-year-old at a premium position who's ascending, is available, and you would be interested in signing that player to a long-term deal, in the offseason if you were available, maybe. The issue is though that like the Bears jumped the line to get Sweat rather than wait till free agency and have to potentially battle other teams. So maybe Washington could look like that. Other than that, I just don't see it. I don't see Peters at all looking to trade any of their, day one, day two, fourth round picks for anything. And also look, like when you're the Jets and you've kind of gone all in, you need to improve now. But also, ultimately, this is a very small market. I'm sitting in a Wawa parking lot. The trade deadline is like the Wawa. It's like convenient. Here's a few things. But if I have to really stock my refrigerator, I'm waiting for the offseason when the whole league is available as free agents and even possibly as trade. So I don't see it. I mean, you can't pretend that contention opportunities come around all the time, but you also have to be realistic. I found a quote the other day from looking through something from Ron Rivera. I think this was back in 2020 when they had this kind of feels the same way a little bit. The rest of the division's a bit of a mess. They're somewhat playing better than you thought. Then it was somewhat. Now it's much more. And he was like, hey, maybe, all you got to do is get in and you never know. Yeah, that's nonsense. Like, sure, you could say that in baseball, you could say that in hockey. How many 500 teams ever do anything in the NFL? I mean, very rarely does a wild card team even advance. And I think if Adam Peters, based on what we've seen, he seems pretty realistic about the situation. And like the defense would have to get substantially better for anybody to think that they could realistically contend. So it doesn't mean they're not going to keep doing what they can do, but I don't see it. To me, it would be more like you're trading a 6 round pick for somebody and you get a seventh back or something like that type of deal. But that's not going to be a player at the level you were talking about. But again, we'll see. If the price is right, and like say that you mentioned Deontay Johnson, who we'll see if he even plays this week, but like I like him. If they like him, and the Panthers are like, "Look, we're not going to keep him, and we'll do something relatively cheap." Maybe, but I just in general I don't see them being buyers.
Ron Rivera also said it probably wasn't good that they went to the division that year because it made them look too good. So, Ron, what do you think the game ends up looking like on Sunday, and what do you think the score looks like?
So I'm having to like constantly recalibrate my thoughts for this team because for the last however many years, it's been pretty easy to just be like, this is a big game, so naturally I expect them to lose. Now this is not a big game relative to, other than that it's the next one, but like it doesn't compare to facing the Ravens or next week even with going up against Caleb Williams and the Bears that have actually been playing better. But I think back before the season started and people wanted predictions or what are your expectations and all that. I was pretty simple. I was like, as Jaden Daniels looks the part and they are competitive every week, that to me is going to be a win regardless of the actual record. And some people were like, that's ridiculous. What are you talking about? I'm like, well, they're not building. If they were going all in for this year, they would have gone out and spend a lot of money. Like they didn't do that. They're clearly trying to reset the attitude, the tone inside, the competitiveness. Okay. The thing is, though, they've been competitive in every game. Like the Tampa game, I'll sort of throw away because it was the first game, and Jaden Daniels obviously looked much more, I don't know if skittish is too hard, but anytime somebody came near the pocket, he kind of took off and whatever. He's been much, much better in that sense. And they've been competitive every game, even this last week, right? I mean, sure, the Ravens were probably going to look, they were going to win no matter what, but they kept fighting back. They only ultimately lost by the one score. And it's not the number, it's just the way the game was going. If that continues, if they're competitive, they're going to win this game by 10 points based on how the Carolina's giving up even way more yards on the ground than Washington is. They're the only team in the league that's allowing more than 30 points a game. They do have a decent run game. They do have a decent offensive line, like you said. If Deontay Johnson plays, he's been a legit problem. And obviously, we see Washington secondaries and all that. But if they remain at their competitive best, then I think they win this game fairly comfortably. Again, I'm not going to get caught with my pants down, but like so far, they have not looked like a team that is looking ahead. That is that they have not come out flat yet. It will happen at some point, but hopefully for their sake, it's not this week against a team that they definitely should beat based on what we've seen from Carolina so far.
All right, Ben. Thank you. I appreciate you. Have a good weekend. Enjoy the game.
Doug, appreciate it, man. Yeah, we'll Daryl Green's getting his number retired, playing Carroll. I mean, this is I always drives me crazy when teams schedule these things in like a game you're probably gonna lose. I think somebody
Yeah,
told me Maryland's
they did
homecoming
right
this.
by Daryl on this one.
Right, I think somebody told me Maryland's homecoming is this week and USC is coming through. I know USC is having some struggles, but USC doesn't seem like the way to go. So at least they scheduled Daryl to give him what should be a proper day.
All right, buddy. Appreciate you.
Thanks, man.